Hello everybody, welcome to the Boxing Science Podcast. This is episode 65, where I'm going to be answering your questions about a range of subjects regarding strength and conditioning, sports science in boxing and combat sports. In this week's episode, we've got questions on how to improve VO2 max for boxing, how to maintain muscle mass when making weight, how to structure and periodize conditioning in part of a training week, and also how to prevent or recover from knockdowns. A pretty interesting subject to cover. Before we get into this week's episode, I'd like to ask a quick favour. If you're not a subscriber to the Boxing Science YouTube channel yet, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out on any future content, and also help support the growth of the channel. So let's get on with this week's episode. Okay, the first question is from Dan Horton, 1988. What are the best ways to maintain muscle during a training camp and when you're making weight? So this is really important. We're wanting to get the optimal body composition when making weight. We're not wanting to carry too much fat mass going into the ring, and also we're not wanting to be draining ourselves in terms of water weight and also carbohydrate intake reduction. We want to try and maintain muscle as much as we can. And the first port of call for this is to do a body composition analysis. This is what our performance nutritionist does, Lee Rickards. We analyze an athlete's body fat and then also highlight how much fat-free mass that they have. So this tells us how much muscle that an athlete potentially has, and then also how we approach that from a strength and conditioning and also a nutrition point of view. Do we need to lose muscle? Do we need to gain muscle? Or do we need to try and maintain muscle as much as we can going into training camp? And then from here, probably the most important tool in terms of trying to retain muscle mass is to get your nutrition strategy on point. The nutrition strategy needs to be able to have enough carbohydrates, fats, and protein, making sure that the calorie intake meets the demands of the calorie expenditure. Obviously, we do some resting metabolic rate assessments to make sure that this is an individualized approach. And then we get a training plan put in place to then make sure that we're fueling in the right way and making sure that the deficit between your intake and your expenditure is at an optimal level. If this is too high, then this is where you can start losing muscle mass instead of targeting reduction of body fat. So that's the main thing that you need to do. We can do everything in terms of strength and conditioning, high intensity conditioning to try and maintain muscle mass as much as can. But if your diet isn't right, we can't out-train an incorrect diet. Let's say that we've got all this in place. From a strength and conditioning point of view, we do strength and conditioning workouts twice per week. This is a range of different lifts from deadlift and squat variations, pushing and pulling, do single leg exercises, and we do core exercises as well. This is normally enough to try and maintain muscle mass during a training camp, but there's a few extras that you can do, including core circuits. So we try and implement 2 core endurance circuits per week. And the reason why we do this is because in our early studies at Boxing Science, we found out that there's a strong correlation between lean muscle mass of the trunk and the core with estimated punching power. So when we're looking to maintain muscle mass, we want to maintain muscle mass in the right areas. We're not just wanting it on the arms where there's weaker correlations with punching power. The lower body has medium to strong correlations with punching power, so we want to try and maintain muscle mass here. But the biggest contributor towards estimated punch force is lean muscle mass of the trunk. So we're wanting to try and do exercises that increase tension and strength capacity of the core. So we do this with our compound lifts and also with our more intense core exercises. But then we can target higher volume body weight exercises to increase that time under tension, metabolic stress, and also the frequency of how often that we do core training. So this is why we encourage boxers to be doing at least 2 core circuits at the end of their boxing or their high intensity conditioning sessions. Something quite easy to do, like 3 or 4 different exercises, making sure that you're hitting all the 4 key movement planes, which is hip flexion with neutral spine, anti-extension, lateral flexion, rotation, making sure that you're doing this for about 3 or 4 sets, part of a circuit, and the rep ranges range between 10 and 15 or 20 and 30 seconds. This is enough to try and maintain that muscle mass during camp, but making sure that we're keeping that muscle mass around the trunk. Okay, the next question from Who Knows 8223. What is your opinion on the most efficient / effective way to train VO2 max? How would you, as a professional, train if your focus would be on solely increasing VO2 max as fast as possible? As VO2 max, we don't really test this at Boxing Science. There is times where we have taken oxygen uptake as part of a lactate profile assessment, but we rarely look at an athlete's VO2 max because there's not much that we can actually do with this testing figure. Obviously, we can set some training zones, but we can also do that with a lactate profile. With a lactate profile, we are taking blood lactate samples from an athlete. We're assessing how their lactate responds at increased intensities. This can tell us a lot more than just a VO2 max because we're seeing how they are able to control muscular acidosis when going up to them higher intensities. This isn't really shown when just looking at just a single figure of VO2 max. But if I were looking to try and improve VO2 max in terms of trying to improve aerobic capacity for boxing, I would be looking for more central adaptations, looking at 4 minutes on, 2 minutes off, which is the famous Norwegian training method. This is the gold standard in terms of improving central adaptations to try and help improve VO2 max. But there is some data and some research that suggests trying to train at a higher intensity, higher speed can get you closer to that VO2 max. You can be able to train at around about 90 to 95% of an athlete's VO2 max with some faster pace intervals. So instead of doing 4 minutes at a set speed, let's say you're running at 16 kilometers an hour, you can actually split this up into intervals, so such as like 15 seconds on, 15 seconds off, 20 seconds on, 10 seconds off across the 4 minutes. Be doing this at a higher speed, and this will help get you closer to working at that VO2 max. There's also a protocol that we use at Boxing Science called the Dragon's Back, and this is where we've got wave loading, where we're not resting in between. We're manipulating the speeds in terms of different intervals. With this, we're able to get an increased average speed across that 4 minutes. And that gets us closer to working at a higher VO2 max. So these are some ways that you can use. Like I said, 4 minutes on, 2 minutes off is your gold standard. Start mixing that up with intervals of 15 on, 15 off, going towards high speed, which will get you closer towards working at your VO2 max, and also working varied intervals like the Dragon's Back, where you're increasing the mean speed across that 4 minutes. So staying on the conditioning theme, got a question from Race Hendricks 7954. How many sprint sessions should you have in a week, and how many long distance runs should you have as an amateur boxer? So typically at Boxing Science, we encourage boxers to be doing at least 2 high-intensity interval training sessions per week. And if they've got the capacity in terms of their training schedule, try and do 3 high-intensity interval training sessions per week. Like I say, like sprint sessions, a lot of boxers and boxing coaches say that sprint sessions are anything under doing 4 minutes of work. Whereas like we highlight sprint sessions as maximum intensity, 30-second sprints, 10-second sprints, everything like that. So as I'm going to describe it now, high-intensity sessions consists of either central adaptations, muscle buffering capacity work, or our sprint interval training sessions. And we typically do them either 2 or 3 sessions per week. Now, in terms of long distance running, especially for amateur boxing, doesn't really meet the demands of the sport. Doing long road runs can help improve aerobic capacity to a certain point at low intensities. Can also help improve calorie expenditure, which can help make weight effectively. However, these don't meet the demands of sport. So we use higher volume sessions and low intensity sessions to help promote active recovery and also to try and increase calorie expenditure. Instead of going on a long road run where you're pounding the roads, we're wanting to try and be more efficient around this. So we do our active recovery sessions where we do intervals and trying to stay below 80% of maximum heart rate. So if this is on your Polar Beat heart rate monitor, you want to be trying to stay in the green zone. And this is helping improve that aerobic capacity, them endurance qualities, but also getting you running at higher speed, because going out on the road, plodding along, not really opening the hips that much. The amount of distance that you're having to cover is quite a lot. So the amount of foot contacts is quite high. So then this is going to have a detrimental effect on your recovery, soreness going into the next session. So we try and do intervals. So athletes are running at a higher pace. This will help open up the hips a lot more and reduce the amount of contacts on the floor. We manipulate the intensities to make sure that we are going up towards higher speeds whilst keeping that heart rate under 80% maximum heart rate. We also do something called tempo runs, which is 15 seconds off, 45 seconds on, running between 18 to 22 kilometers an hour. And we do this for between 6 and 8 repetitions. We have 2 minutes recovery, and then we do this 3 or 4 times. And this can really work in that green zone to help improve aerobic capacity, can also help endurance qualities, whilst also running a lot less distance. We actually did this with an athlete where predicted on a 40-minute run at this pace, he would be covering 6.5 kilometers. Whereas the session that we did, where we got exactly the same adaptation, exactly the same amount of time within that heart rate zone, the athlete only did 1.5 kilometers. So this is 4 times less distance. Calculate this across a full training camp, we're taking a lot less out of that athlete. So using tempo runs, using active recovery sessions where we're using intervals rather than doing long road runs, this is a more favoured approach that we use at Boxing Science, because we're getting the benefits from a longer run, but we're also not taking too much out of an athlete. We can then put in more effort and more intensity into our boxing sessions and our high intensity conditioning sessions. So I've got a question from Never Fold Sports, which is quite interesting. Your top 5 favourite boxing workouts to get prepared for knockdowns. He's also asked another question on ways to strengthen the chin. So how to improve your punch resistance and to recover from knockdowns. So there's not much evidence that supports like how to recover from knockdowns and knockouts, because to do this in a study will be not ethical. This is all kind of like the general things from experience, talking to fighters, looking at kind of what champions say about recovering from knockdowns and everything like that. What we're quite interesting is Adam Booth talked about this with a podcast with Simon Jordan, talked about how they prepared David Haye to get knocked down against Mormek for the Cruiserweight World title back in 2007. And they said how they prepared David Haye to recover from knockdowns, so like doing some drills from being dizzy or getting up or anything like that. So because they anticipated from getting knocked down. But something that probably is more important is the experience of that. David Haye got knocked down earlier on in his career, got knocked out earlier on in his career. So he had the experience of going through that. So it's very difficult to go to an athlete, go, right, these are ways to improve your punch resistance, because as Mike Tyson says, everybody's got a plan till they get punched in the face. It's more to do with experience, how you deal with that knockdown, rather than probably the exercises that you could potentially do. Maybe from a sports psychology point of view, you can go through a lot of what if scenarios. A lot of boxers and a lot of like kind of mindset coaches at the minute are saying about see, believe, achieve, and kind of visualizing what success looks like. But I think what an important point of view is to be like, what about if it doesn't go as well? What about if you do fatigue in a fight? What about if you do get caught with a shot? What about if you do get a point taken off? Creating some what if scenarios and how you're going to be able to manage things going wrong in a fight. That's really important for a boxer to consider. So what plans do you have if you get knocked down in a fight? So you're not in that scenario thinking, I haven't got experience of this, I'm not prepared for this, what do I do now? You already know. A fantastic example of this is when Jordan Gill fought Gurfey for the European title. He was in a really bad position in terms of perforating his eardrums, had a bad knee, being DDT'd in the fight, so probably had some mild concussion. And he got to the point where he couldn't actually kind of move around the ring. So he placed himself in the corner and was able to defend and block shots and counter, and actually knocked Gurfey out in the 9th round. This went viral. Everybody in the arena went absolutely crazy because of the shock. But Jordan had that belief all the way through that he was going to land that shot, because this is what he practiced in the gym with his coach, Dave Caldwell, practicing on the ropes, practicing defending and blocking and moving and being in them vulnerable positions. Prepare for plan A, but also you've got a plan for B, C, D. So there are a few things. In terms of trying and improve your punch resistance, neck training can be a thing. It's been seen to try and reduce concussion. And obviously concussion can lead to knockdowns or knockouts. Doing neck training is important. So doing some lateral work, doing some flexion and extension work as well. We predominantly do isometric banded work. We start from a strength endurance point of view between 20 and 30 seconds, and then work down to more high intensity work, whether that is with a band or with a manual resistance. And this high intensity work is going to an effort between 8 or even 10 out of 10 effort, and going for between 3 and 5 seconds. But I'd say that the main thing to try and improve punch resistance is your ability to make weight safely and effectively. So many fights are lost on a bad weight cut. They're not the right weight category, or they've approached it in the wrong way. And this really affects their punch resistance. Can lead to knockdowns, can lead to knockouts. So this is really important, and this is why at Boxing Science, we do our body composition analysis to make sure an athlete is fighting at the right weight category. So we're not depleting them too much to make that weight. And then also making sure that they make weight safely and effectively by a structured approach, making sure that their weight descent is nice and steady throughout the training camp. Last weight cut in terms of water, glycogen and fiber manipulation is done safely and effectively. And then the refuel strategy is done so we're optimizing that rebound and optimizing their performance in the ring. We're always talking about how to win and how to perform well, but the main thing is that our athletes are healthy and safe going into that ring. So this question from Atomek0666. I'm 67 kilos right now and I want to go up in weight class. And the question is, should I add some hypertrophy exercises to build muscles and gain weight? By this a little easier, or should I just eat and wait for weight gain? I want to go to 83 to 86 kilos. So this is a quite significant jump. I'd say not to, but if you can afford to not jump up to that weight class, putting on muscle mass force in that way is going to be detrimental to your performance, especially in a short window. We suggest for obviously boxers to highlight what weight category that they should be fighting at. And this is done through a body composition analysis. And if they're in a position where they are needing to move up weight, they can do that quite naturally just by fueling a bit more during training camp, and they just naturally fill out to that camp. So rather than going, right, we're actually having to put on that muscle mass to try and move up in weight category, this should happen quite naturally. So for you to be going, right, I'm going to move from 67 all the way up to 83, 86 kilos, this is quite a big jump. So if you find it quite hard to go up to 67, think about the next weight category, which might be for you in amateur boxing, might be 72 or 75 kilos. If there is some room for increasing muscle mass, making sure that you're in a calorie surplus, which is really important, and making sure that you're fueling that in the right way and not putting on fat mass. And then from a strength and conditioning point of view, you wanting to make sure that you're putting on functional muscle mass, not wanting to just try and put on muscular hypertrophy and put it on like a powerlifter or bodybuilder, because this can stimulate slow twitch muscle fibers and put on some unnecessary muscle mass. So what we're wanting to do is trying to increase the fast twitch muscle mass, muscular hypertrophy. You can do this through 4 key ways, which are cluster sets, where we're doing a higher weight load, but we're going to be using higher volumes, but we're doing this with a break in between. So instead of doing 8 reps back to back, we're doing 8 reps, but with a 10 to 20 second recovery in between. We can do this on deadlifts, on squats, and also on your pressing exercises as well. We can also use drop sets where we're doing a high volume rep range, but we're making sure that the first part of that rep range is done at higher intensity. For example, weighted pull-ups, where we'll do 3 to 5 repetitions with a weight, drop the weight and increase the volume at the back end. So doing between 6 and 8 reps towards that back end of that set. And you can also do this with pressing activities, so doing it with a chest press or doing it with a shoulder press, where you're increasing the weight load at the start, popping it down and then doing it on a reduced weight load. You can also use supersets. This is where you're pairing up a compound exercise with an assistance exercise. Again, this is increasing the volume, but making sure intensity is still there. And then also you can use blood flow restriction training. So BFR training for short. This is restricting the blood and the oxygen delivered to the working muscle. This will help fatigue slow twitch muscle fibers and increase the activation of fast twitch muscle fibers under a reduced weight load. So we go for a 30 rep, 15 rep protocol. We can use this on the arms and we can also use this on the lower body. Something else that we can do is use core endurance circuits to help increase muscle mass around that trunk area, which we've seen to be beneficial and the biggest contributor towards estimated punching force. So hopefully that's answered your questions around how to increase muscle mass to try and move up weight category. But the main thing that you want to do is make sure that you're moving up weight category for a reason, and also just making them small jumps, because we've seen in the past where people have put on too much mass, trying to move up too much too soon, they end up being quite fatigued and everything like that. So be quite considerate in your next move in terms of how and when to move up weight. Okay guys, so that's the end of this week's episode of the Boxing Science Podcast. Thank you very much for watching or listening. If you like this content, hit that like button. And also if you're not a subscriber yet, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out on any future content. Thank you very much for watching and listening, and thank you for your questions. Hopefully see you on the next episode of the Boxing Science Podcast.